All right. Welcome back. We are Game 2014 in the fall 2021 semester. And it's week one, part one of our broadcast, mobile game development at GBC, George Brown College. And I'm your host, Tom. Welcome back, guys. So this is me. You guys mostly know who I am. Thank you so much for coming back. And I'm really excited to be here this semester. We're going to be talking about mobile game development and why it's important to do and all that kind of stuff. We're going to be working with Unity, which I know a lot of you have been looking forward to doing. I know you've been working with Unreal and other kind of C++ engines and other things, but this semester we're working mostly with Unity. You'll have two flavors of Unity that you'll be working with, one with me, which is mobile game dev, and another one with Joss, where he does kind of traditional game dev for PC with Unity for 2D only. So this semester is 2D. Next semester, when we get together, it'll be for 3D. There's a slide here that I'm not going to share up online. If you look up slide 3 on Blackboard, it'll also have our Discord server. I'm not going to share the Discord server on YouTube, just for privacy purposes. All right, so now the next part. Let's get into the course semantics. So again, from a course outline perspective, there'll be several lab exercises. Lab exercises start next week. So we'll be starting next week on every week. There'll be a lab exercise worth about 1% of your final grade for a total of 10 of them. There'll be some weeks there's no lab exercise. For example, in the practical test week, which happens on week 7, right? So there are 2 practical tests, one at week 7 and one at week 15. We'll talk about that in a second. And they're both worth 10% each. And there are 2 theoretical tests, and I believe one that happens week 4 and the other one that happens week 12. And it basically covers mobile game dev theory. So that's what it covers right now. So those are the tests. We have 2 assignments that are broken up into 2 pieces. So one of them, assignment 1, we create a kind of a classic arcade game for mobile, all right? And that's individual. So again, there's 2 individual assignments broken up into 2 separate releases, if you will. Okay, again, we're not using a agile methodology this semester. That's more for next semester when you do things in teams. This semester, everything you do is individual, which means it's all you. You're going to do the Unity stuff. You're going to be producing your game. You're going to be making your game design document. It's all you, right? So that you learn how to do everything that you can in Unity, all right? So that is, first one is a kind of a classic arcade game. The second one is a platformer. So those 2 games will teach you enough, should teach you enough about Unity to get going and to really get you comfortable with the Unity game engine for 2D mobile. All right, then we get into the schedule. So this week, we're just doing an intro to mobile game development. We're going to basically do a Unity setup. There is a lab, so to speak, but there's no marks associated with it. So there's no, I'm not going to, kind of do lab 1 today. This week is just like, hey, download Unity, set it up. As an example, download LD Player, which is the kind of the emulator of choice for this semester. Set it up, and then see if you can, just as a practice, build for the player. And we'll talk about that. A lot of the stuff you're going to be learning, because you're learning Unity twice, once with me and once with Professor Joss. He'll be teaching you kind of a lot of other things that I won't cover. So there's going to be some assumptions. Some of the stuff that I'm going to kind of cover with you, chances are he may cover as well. But there's going to be some cross-pollination between the 2 of us, but most of it is going to be fairly different from one to the other. So we're going to be talking about just an intro this week and why mobile, like why do we want to design for mobile games and all that kind of stuff. Then we're going to next week start off with mobile game design, a little bit about game design. We're also going to release assignment 1, part 1 to start getting you going. And assignment 1, part 1 is due on week 4, and assignment 2 or assignment 1, part 2 is going to be around week 6. Sometimes traditionally, last semester we ran this course which was in the fall of 2020. It ran into week 7. I'd like to try and avoid that because week 7 is also your practical test, and I wouldn't want those two things to collide as much as possible. When we talk about practical test or theoretical test, you have the entire week to get it done. It's a take-home test as normal. We're in a remote learning scenario. So, again, there's not going to be pressure of you doing it in a time constraint. You have the entire week to get it done. And both the test as well as the practical test, the practical little assignment for the week, they're geared for about one of them is geared for about an hour. That's the theoretical test, and the practical test is about 2 hours. So it shouldn't take you the whole week to do, and that's the idea behind it. All right, so that is the first half. So the first half is basically building capability, understanding how to do some basic things with Unity and mobile, and getting touch input, presses and gestures, and all that kind of basic thing. So that is what's happening in the first half. In the second half, you'll be building a platformer. So we'll go back and review physics again. How to do physics, how to use Unity physics, how to employ Unity physics. We'll also include a little bit of AI, some scene management, building for mobile, special effects in terms of particle systems, and some kind of special topics that we're going to hit in week 14. And that's really our course in a nutshell. Very straightforward, Unity for mobile. Okay, so that's what the course is really geared for. What this course used to be was Android. It used to be an Android course native, where you build Android games. Again, that's kind of something that we can't do at this point because we're remote. So we've chosen to use Unity. And we may continue to use Unity in the future, even when we when we go to in-person learning, as it's a good kind of hybrid platform for both iOS and Android. That's awesome. Unity Remote is terrible. So we're not going to use Unity Remote anymore, Kira. So pitch it. It's going to be LD player, right? Unity Remote is like the worst thing ever. Let's continue with the structure. And no offense to anybody, I just feel that Unity Remote is probably the worst thing you can possibly use. And it's slow. There's all kinds of problems. One day it might be okay, but for now, not really recommended. Assignment videos. We're going to make you guys do assignment videos again this semester. Again, from a remote learning perspective and academic integrity, we've asked you to basically demo your application that you're making, your little game dev. And one thing that to note is, even though your assignments have a weighting for the video, without a video, it won't be marked. So videos are mandatory. Please make sure you get them done. How do you do a video? You can do it through YouTube, but what if you're in a country that YouTube is not supported? You can certainly use something else. Anything that's clickable, even if you're in Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox, as long as I can click it and run it, I'm okay with the video format. Okay, so it doesn't have to be YouTube if you don't want it. Okay. The other thing is, you must have a single slide to start your video. So some people forget this. I know we've done this in the past. And when you've had me before, maybe it's been a while, I haven't seen you guys in a bit and you've forgotten, but I need one slide in your slide deck. And that slide is, hey, here's me. This is my name. Here's my student ID. This is the course code. This is what the assignment is that we're making. Demo your assignment in the simulator or emulator. In this case, we're using an emulator. And I need to be able to see your screen and hear you in the video. If I can't see your screen and I can't hear you, the video is useless, and it's like you didn't submit a video. So make sure you please make your video normal. If you want to test it, you should be able to download your video and be able to hear yourself and see your screen. If you can't do that, I can't do that. If your video is not accessible, or if we're using GitHub and your GitHub link doesn't work, you'll lose marks, or I won't mark it. So please make sure you can access it before you submit it. Okay. I don't need your video to be private, but it can certainly be unlisted, okay? Please don't make it private. That means you're going to have to send me your password and all that kind of stuff, and that would be bad. Okay, so that's kind of like the assignment video thing. What are we doing today? In this week, we're kind of talking about the course outline, which was kind of a check mark. Video demonstration requirements we just did. We're going to talk about an intro to mobile development, something about mobile operating systems, hardware limitations of mobile devices. We're going to be talking about, what about the Nintendo Switch? Is that a mobile device? Can we use that? And we're going to also, in the second half of today, we're going to take a break after the theoretical piece, just about 10 minutes. And we're going to get back and get you guys to install Unity Hub and the latest version of Unity. And for those people who are curious, we're going to be using Unity version. I'm going to put this inside of the chat for everyone as well. So Unity version is 2021.1.19 F1. That's the one I want you guys to use the entire semester. So we're not switching that, even if it updates to something else. We're going to stay with Unity 2021.1.19 F1. So please download that version in Unity Hub. Okay. And we're also going to be using LD Player. So we're going to be talking about that. So for those people who want to get that going, LD Player is the emulator of choice for this semester, LD Player. The modules that you're going to need, obviously, are going to be a build for Windows. That's the module. You're going to need Android, and you're going to need WebGL. Some people also want to download iOS. If you're an iOS user, if you're someone who owns a Mac, then you can certainly build for iOS. If you don't own a Mac, don't download iOS. It's going to be useless to you. But you definitely need those three: Windows, Android, and WebGL. We're not building for Linux, but usually it's Windows, Linux, Mac. And the other thing that I'm not asking you to do is UWP. You don't need to download that, but if you want to, you can, okay, as an option. But those three, Windows, Android, and WebGL, are the only three things you need. Okay, so start downloading that. It does take a while, and those two things end up being about 30 gigabytes of download package size. So make sure you have enough space on your machine for you to do that. Also, disable any virus scanners with respect to LD Player, as it can create an issue. All right, so that's the Unity package we're going to be talking about in the second half of today, and some brief Unity interface overview. I'm going to talk about some layouts that I prefer and so on. And again, Joss will go into a little bit more detail with you when you see him. All right, so any questions before we move on? This is the time you can post questions on your chat here, and we can move on. All right, don't see any questions coming up. Maybe I'm moving a little bit fast, and if I am, you can always ask questions through a bunch of different ways here. You can ask questions through the chat on YouTube, since we're live. You can ask questions through our Discord server, and we can do that too. So if you want to pop a question to me through Discord, you can do that too. While we're going, I'll try and check all of them. So here's one quick question regarding the classroom interaction. Mic use allowed when asking questions in this class, text only. You can definitely use a mic, but Benjamin, if you do use a mic, you will be recorded on YouTube. So you have to be careful, and please be respectful in terms of language, but otherwise just the YouTube video won't work. Okay, so from that perspective, if you want to ask a question, when I come to you and I say any questions, or if you put up your hand with a reaction, I will come back and get back to you and answer your question as much as possible. All right, let's move on. So let's get into why and what is mobile game dev, and why mobile game dev, and all that kind of stuff. Let's get into that. So there are basically at this point in time, as of this recording, two mobile operating systems, Android and iOS. At one point or another, there were more. For example, Windows had their own operating system, Microsoft, as well as BlackBerry was a big one. It was a big contender in the market way back. Right now, BlackBerry is kind of not really happening, especially for games. And Windows Phone is kind of defunct. Maybe in the future with Windows 11, that might change. But for now, the two operating systems we care about in this course are Android and iOS. All right, so let's talk about Android. Android, Linux-based. It's been around since 2007 for the most part. It was developed by developed by the Android Corporation, acquired by Google, and now it's been, more development has been done by Google. Android is by far the most prevalent operating system when it comes to mobile devices. in the world right now. It powers not just phones, but also VR headsets and a bunch of other stuff. In terms of advantages, one of the things is has an open source approach. So they compared to iOS, which is proprietary, Android allows users to easily get in and build applications and games for the platform. Okay, so what Android does is very adaptable, and it's easy for you to learn how to develop for it. From a disadvantage perspective, there's a ton of hardware out there. So whenever you buy a new phone, the latest phones has the latest operating system a lot of times, but there's so many phones out there with different capabilities. It's not a homogeneous situation, similar to what we do with PCs today. One of the biggest challenges with AAA game developers is that they develop for the average PC, and they have recommendations or requirements. They have something like, here's my minimum, requirements. Here's my, the good system requirements that they want you to have. It's similar when it comes to Android devices, when they want you to have a game that's pretty demanding on the hardware. And by the way, these things really heat up when you play a game that's demanding, because they're small little devices. They don't have fans. They depend on heat sinks and all that kind of stuff. So we're back to the old days where we had hardware limitations. Because for the most part, if you think about it, when we're developing for PC, there's really no limitation. Not really, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you might have a memory limitations or whatever, but for the most part, it's much more open than, for example, an Android device or an iOS device. Android and iOS devices have CPU limitations, GPU limitations, memory limitations, space limitations, and a bunch of other capabilities, sensors that are different from one device to the other, as an example. So there's lots of limitations. Okay, so that's the problem. And specifically for Android, because there's so many different kinds of phones, and Google doesn't push you to upgrade. It doesn't force you to do it. If you don't want to do it, it's okay. For the most part, they allow you to run with your older phone with an earlier operating system, and you can do it for a long, long time. Apple, on the other hand, they push you to upgrade. And most of the people who own an iPhone have the latest version of their operating system installed, if their phone can support it. If they can't, they force you to upgrade. They kind of push you and encourage you to upgrade your phone to the latest version of the iPhone. And there's a different business model behind both operating systems. So let's get back. So imagine trying to build from multiple Android devices, smaller devices, smaller screen sizes with a bevel, screens that are curved, screens that fold, all kinds of things that you have to think about as a developer. Whereas iOS devices, it's more, like I said, homogeneous environments. So here, even though Android has a lot of penetration in the market, it's also one of its disadvantages. From a how do we market Android devices? There's two basic stores, the Google Play Store and the Amazon App Store. Those two locations for getting applications basically create an environment that Android users can download thousands of apps and tons of different kinds of games every single month. All right, so that's an advantage, I would say. And they have different kinds of business models that they use. They might use priced or free or in-app purchases, very similar. And again, please forgive me. I'm assuming you know nothing about mobile game development whatsoever. So if you know something, that's fantastic. But my assumption is you don't know anything. All right, and this way would cover everything that you need to know and maybe even more. So again, Google Play makes your apps visible, and the App Store is still the biggest app store available in the world, even bigger than iOS. And again, it's millions of apps that are available, especially for game development and games in general. But the challenge with Google, and this is kind of a positive and a negative, is that the amount of quality control, I would say, on the Google Play Store is quite lower than the iOS, the App Store for iOS. And the reason for this is because Google allows developers to come in, and the barriers to entry to become a developer for Google is very low. $25 one-time fee, and you're in, and you don't have to pay that ever again. And we're going to talk about the differences between that and iOS development. From a language perspective, in IDE, the main language, if you want to develop native apps for Android, is Java. All right, still the most popular language. I would say as a second language, when it comes to app development and game development, it would be Kotlin. Okay, that's the second one. And let's talk a little bit about some history. So back in the day when Android Corporation was creating the Android operating system, they spoke with the people that used to govern and run Java, which was an open source language at the time. Java and that whole community was acquired by Oracle. And so there came to be a kind of a dispute between Google, who owns Android, and Oracle, who controls and owns Java. Google claims that they have an email from the original developers of Java that said that, yes, Google, you can use Java indefinitely for your Android development. Oracle has disputed this fact, and they forced Google to think about an alternate programming language, which is now Kotlin. And it's developed from the same people that have developed ReSharp or C# and ReSharp or C++, JetBrains, that company. They also created something called Android Studio as they moved away from using something called Eclipse, which was owned or governed, I would say, kind of ran by IBM. And nowadays, we've moved away from using Eclipse for Android development, and we use typically either NetBeans as an example or Android Studio, most likely Android Studio, because there's so many tools involved for native Android development. Also on that, we can also use C and C++ for development, a little bit more rare. C++ gives us a lot more control, but as you guys know, since you guys are all C++ developers, we've done it over the last couple of years, then you know how challenging it is to do things like balancing memory management, CPU demands, and so on. It's very challenging. And can you imagine even more challenging for a mobile device? So again, most popular language, Java, followed by Kotlin. And we have to also mention Unity 3D and the Unreal Engine have great support for Android development, which is why we're doing the course the way we're doing it this semester. Because it's a great cross-platform environment, right? Write your game once, and deploy everywhere. That's, the idea for Unity and Unreal. So that is your mobile operating system for Android. iOS is the mobile operating system for Apple. Again, back in 2007, it was released for iPhone and iPod Touch, and it was extended for the iPad. Now we have iPad OS, and we also have Watch OS, two different other platforms, very similar in terms of structure to iOS. And one thing to note is that iOS cannot be installed on non-Apple devices. So if you're developing for Apple, you have to have a Mac. There's just no other way around it. You can do Mac in the cloud. You can do a Mac, a Hackintosh. You can do all kinds of stuff to make it happen. But if you're going to be a true mobile developer, most mobile developers have a Mac. That's just the way it is, right? Do I expect you guys to have a Mac this semester? No, I don't. And why? Because we're going to be largely targeting Android devices. However, a lot of the things that we're talking about this semester in terms of the way we're doing stuff, why we're doing it, all those things also apply to iOS devices. So again, it's just a simple build target that we're going to change, and we can change to iOS. We can produce the same game on both devices. We can even target PC, and a lot of times that's what happens. You make a very successful game on a mobile device, and then you port it over to PC as well, just like the other way around, where you make a really cool game on PC and port it to a mobile device. All right, so mobile operating system number 2 is iOS. And I say number 2 because it is the number 2 operating system. Android is still more prevalent and in the market than iOS. From a market perspective, iPhone is still number 3 in the global smartphone market. I would say LG and Samsung are bigger. Apple stocks, if you were around in 2001 when Apple was starting to kick off, I remember back in the day for me, I was like, Apple, they're not really that great. Apple phones, why would I want that? I'd wanted my BlackBerry at the time, right? But if you invested and if you were smart and if you had foresight, then you could have made all kinds of money because it's grown 15,000% over that period of time. They've generated a lot of money. And why? Because they had really smart marketing. And Steve Jobs was I would say, great entrepreneur, and he was very creative. He was, I would say, a genius entrepreneur. And things have changed over the time. I mean, things have really improved, and they came to a peak. And I think right now, Apple doesn't lead as much as it follows the stuff that we've seen come up from Android. So again, I'm a real Apple believer. I have an Apple iPhone, I have a watch, I have Apple TV, I have an iPad, and so on, Macs. It doesn't really matter. Even if you're an Apple believer, you can't, really dispute the fact that over the last few years, anyway, until maybe last year when they came up with their new chipset, they were really not making a lot of innovations. All they were doing was iterating on the same thing over and over again, making slight changes to the operating system, making adjustments. And there was a period of a great stability with iPhones for a long, long time. So again, even though they saw a decline in terms of what they expected for profits, they still are one of the most profitable, maybe even the most profitable companies ever, right? In terms of the stock market. So one thing we note is that the App Store has a different structure when it comes to accepting developers' builds. So when I submit an app to Google Play, I'm in. I'm good. It's submitted. And if I get hits or people start downloading it, it's wonderful. Not so for iOS. For iOS, I have to submit the app, and when the app is submitted to the App Store, there's going to be a physical user or someone who is going to validate that the app meets human interface guidelines from Apple, as well as all of other Apple's standards when it comes to submissions. So there's a whole set of guidelines and structures that you need to kind of juggle around in order for your app to be accepted in the App Store. What this does is it causes a barrier to entry for iOS devices or for iOS applications, right? Why? They look at a lot of different factors. What's your interface look like? Is it good? Is it comfortable for the user to use? What is the usability? They look at usability in terms of, can any user use it? What about if somebody who had issues, with sight? Do you have a colorblind mode? Is there, they look at a bunch of stuff that Google just doesn't look at, right? I'm not saying that all Google games are terrible, but I'm saying there's a lot of stuff out there that maybe shouldn't be there. For Apple, it's the same, but there's less of it. And the quality standards are much, much higher, right? So what this does is it removes competitors from the market with an iOS. And you have slightly higher quality, I would say, games. Now, there's ways around it. And one of the things that they've done over the last little while, for example, back in the day when you had this strict submission guidelines, you have smart developers that are trying to get around it. And what they would do is they would do, just the same game with a different skinning. So it looks the same, it looks different, maybe different assets, slightly different rule sets. It's the exact same game. And what they do is they submit the game. This happened in India and in Asia, in the Asian markets. They would submit the game 10 times. Why? Because you had a human approver, basically, on the Apple side. So some human would look at this game, compare it to the standards, and there was some variation in the way they approved games. Even though they used the same checklist, some people were a little stricter than others. So what they did was, if they submitted 10 times, chances are there's one human approver that's going to approve the game, and then they shut the other ones down. So that's something that stopped happening. What's happened is Apple got really tight with that again from a quality perspective, they realized that was happening. It wasn't something that was rocket science to happen because people are going to game the market and try and get their applications approved. And they started shutting those down. And the other way that Apple does it is they want you to be a full-time developer. So every time there's a change to the operating system, when we'll talk about languages and IDE in a second. Every time there's a change, you need to update your app. And if you don't update your app, basically you can't use it in the next version of the operating system. It's that simple. So they'll keep on doing that to make sure that you're actively updating and developing your application, whether it's a game or an app that's a task manager. It doesn't matter. That's what they keep doing. And I think it's a good thing because it keeps quality high, but it's also a high barrier to entry. One other thing is, for you to be a developer, an iPhone developer for iOS devices, it costs just for iOS devices, not for Macs or anything else. It's $99 US per year, right? Remember that other money we talked about for Android? $25 one-time fee. Here's $99 every single year. So that's another barrier to entry. Why? They want you to be dedicated as a developer. They don't want to fly-by-night or casual developers come on board and just throw stuff on the App Store and pollute the App Store with apps that are sub-quality. All right? So that's what they were, subpar, if you will. One thing was, back in the day when they first started developing iOS applications, Objective-C, which was kind of like a cousin of C and C++, kind of a mix between C and C++, Objective-C. That was the main programming language we made application with. It was an ugly language. And over the last little while, back in 2014 in the WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference held by Apple, they created Swift, the Swift programming language that is much more modern. It's declarative in terms of the way it works. It's very... I don't know. It's kind of a mix. It's hard to describe. Kind of a mix of JavaScript as well as protocol-oriented, a protocol-oriented language. Not just object-oriented, but they prefer using interfaces over classes, and it's just the way they do things. They don't support multiple inheritance with Swift, but they allow you to create similar structures by extending an interface, with using Swift, which is really cool. So that's what they've done there. So I think it's a good language. It's not comfortable for you to start learning. When you start learning, they talk about it. If you know it's the easiest language for you to start developing on. I disagree. I don't think it's an easy language to learn. I've been using Swift and developing with Swift for a few years now. I would say, let's say 10, and I don't think it's an easy language at all. All right. And not quite 10 because it came out in 2014, but from the very first moment that it came out, let's say I was developing with Swift, and I find that it's challenging. It's challenging to use because it's very wordy. It's big. It's easier than Objective-C. Absolutely. Would I use C++? Hell no. I would not use C++ developing for iOS devices. But I think Swift needs more iterations before it becomes more comfortable to use. And I think you're going to see that if you try and develop native applications with Swift. Xcode is the other problem. I like Xcode and I hate Xcode at the same time. Xcode is the IDE. It's an alternative to Visual Studio that we use for applications. And for native applications, you use Android Studio. I think Android Studio is a little better than Xcode. Is Xcode comfortable to use as an IDE? For everything, for C++ development, for everything else, I would say no. I would say Visual Studio, Microsoft, and one thing that Microsoft does really well is make great applications, great utilities and tools. They're a tools company, and I think they make just better IDEs in general than Apple does. Xcode has improved a pile since it first started off. Xcode wasn't Xcode. It was Xcode and Interface Builder, and they kind of smashed it together to make one integrated development environment, which is pretty good at this point. I think it's more mature than when I started using Swift, back around 2014. So you got to figure that it's come a long way. Is it easy to use? It's okay. I would say. There's a lot of stuff that's in it that's hidden, similar to what we see in Visual Studio, but it is a barrier to entry. If you're used to using Visual Studio or something like Android Studio or IntelliJ IDEA, which is the same, made by the same group of people, JetBrains, it's a departure from that. It's very different. In fact, iOS development in general, the way they do it, the interface how the interface works when you build an application is very different than Android. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, where Android might be a 7 to learn in terms of challenge, it's a 10. It's very challenging. The entire environment is hard to kind of understand how to use, even for the seasoned developer. In fact, maybe even if you're too seasoned, it's worse because you have to unlearn what you have learned, Jedi, right? And it's really that different. So again, what we said here is you must own a Mac. There is no way around this thing. You can't really get around it too much. You can emulate certain things, but in order for you to be a true mobile developer, a Mac is required. Okay, so that's kind of, again, these are all barriers to entry from native development. And so why would you do native development? Why? I've talked about all these things, using Java or Kotlin to make games, or even something like C++, which you could do if you really wanted to, and program, right in the kernel and program the GPU manually and stuff if you really want to. It's crazy, but you could do it if you really wanted to, or using Swift. And one thing that Apple has that to help you make stuff is they have one thing I have to mention as a plus. Let me just go back one slide here, which I didn't mention this morning or this earlier this afternoon, was they have a ton of APIs. That's one thing that the Apple ecosystem has, maybe more than Android. For example, they have Sprite Kit, Scene Kit, and they have just all kinds, AR Kit, and all those kits that they have is a group of APIs that you can tap into that are very well developed and super documented. So it's not like you can't get things going quickly. It's just you don't know what you don't know, and I would say the learning curve for Swift and iOS is just that much more. Plus the barriers to entry in terms of development costs and everything else. Could you do it for free to some degree? Yes, you could. But if you wanted to put something in the App Store, you need to pay that $99. So one thing we're also going to be talking about this semester is hardware limitations. We talked about that briefly, but remember that whenever you have a phone, it's like having a little mini computer in your pocket. And it's exactly that, a little smart device, which has a CPU, which has heat, which has a battery, which has limited capabilities and different capabilities from one device to the other. One device has LiDAR and the other one doesn't. One device, most of them have GPS at this point now. Some of them have can take multiple SIM cards. Others can't. You want to be able to tap into the camera. Some have better cameras than others, right? It's not a homogeneous market out there. And it's fraught with limitations, right? So that's a challenge. If I was a mobile developer, should I have every kind of Android device out there? Well, you know what? Realistically, I'd want to have a bunch of the more popular ones. Because even though I'm emulating stuff with LD Player and other emulators out there, whatever, right? There's nothing that really plays like the actual device itself. We should always test on the device when it comes to how the actual game runs. Because in an emulator, it might work great. Remember, it's an emulator. It's trying to be like the device, but there's nothing like the actual device. So you should have some basic devices at hand. So if you're in a studio or whatever that did mobile application development, the expectation is you'd be given a bunch of test devices to deploy to, the most popular ones. Same thing with iOS. You'd want to have a few different versions of the iPhone available, most likely the most popular ones. Chances are an iPhone 7 all the way up to an iPhone 12. You'd want to have a bunch of different ones there. Is it reasonable for a indie developer to have those things? No, it's not. But it's okay to start developing in an emulator. And this is where we're going to start this semester. Okay, so hardware limitations is something we have to think about. We never had to really think about that before. And we talked about hardware variability because there's a lot of variations out there. Okay. What about the Nintendo Switch? Now, question back to you guys. Do you think the Switch is a mobile device? Would you say it's a mobile device or not? What do you think? So again, this is to you guys. You can answer the question via chat. You can also come on the mic if you want to, if you don't care about being recorded. Can you make calls on it? No. So the answer is no. Okay. Justin says, I don't think it classifies as one. Good. What else? Okay. No, not a mobile device. So some people would basically, you know, they could argue. They could say, you know what, but it is mobile, right? It's something that's it's something I can take with me, right? It's something that I can play games on. It's something that I can run apps on, theoretically. So could it be considered a mobile device? The answer is, well, maybe is the answer. But for me, a mobile device is what Kiara said earlier, which is, can I make a phone call? No, then it's really not in the same class. I would say that the Switch is a mobile console. Now, here's the question. Will mobile devices, like your iPhone or Android device, compete with the Switch? And the answer is, given time, yes, they will. Why? And think about other devices like that Steam box that just came out, right? We just had a Steam device that's very similar to the Switch that just came out, right? And why? Because they want to eat Nintendo's lunch, right? And I mean that in terms of their market share. Nintendo has pretty much an exclusive market share right now in a mobile console market, right? It's beat out PlayStation. PSP is not there anymore, right? There isn't really another device that's viable except for the Steam device that just came out, right? It's a portable console. But where it might lose out is the cloud. Xdrive is something that is continuously being developed by Microsoft, and Xbox. It's almost like an Xbox to go, where you can stream Xbox games to any device. So if the device is capable and if you're connected to the internet, then theoretically it can be just as good as your Switch. However, one thing that the Switch has that Microsoft and PlayStation will never have is its beautiful IP. This is where the Switch shines, and this is where it's deployed or employed something called the blue ocean strategy, where it's the only player really in the ocean, right, that can play. There isn't anyone else that can come close to the IP that Nintendo owns with their first-party titles. Nobody, right? And that's where they've won out. That's how they've made the Switch work, right? Whereas Microsoft, with their whole Xbox Game Pass, this is where maybe they can catch up. Using it in combination with Xdrive, maybe they can stream a game to a device, any device, even the Switch, theoretically. And so in that way, kind of compete. Same thing with Sony, and there's other players in the market like Google Stadia and so on that might come to the point where it's as competitive. I don't know anybody, to be honest with you, that uses that exclusively, Stadia, where they stream it to a device that it's more popular than the Switch or maybe another console. But definitely there's a lot of potential there. So I think this is where we're going to see, Nintendo have competition, where devices like your phone are going to be so powerful and so quick and so connected, right, that it won't matter, that your phone will be able to play any game that pretty much is available for console or PC. Is it going to happen anytime soon? No. Because, think about the Cyberpunk 2077s out there. Can you run Cyberpunk 2077 on your phone? No. Can you run it and stream it from the cloud? Maybe. And that's where the beautiful thing is. Is it going to be playable? Don't know. Right? But that's where the challenges are for Nintendo. So is it a mobile device? I would say not. I would say it's a mobile console. But I think it's very interesting to think about developing for Nintendo in the future. And I think in a future iteration of this course or the next course, which is going to be around 3D mobile development, I would say it's something we should think about. All right, so that is a Nintendo. Can we develop for the Switch? One thing that I have to say is that it's challenging. It's similar to Apple in terms of their proprietary nature. If you want to develop for an earlier, kind of a hardware platform, as an example, if I want to develop for the Wii or the Wii U, no problem. But if I want to develop for the Switch, man, I got to do all kinds of jumping through hoops to say that I'm a developer and la la la. There's a lot of stuff involved. And it's just like developing for ID at Xbox. You need to be a company. You need to have, or even Steam, right? So it's not as simple as, hey, I'm a casual developer that I want to put something up. No, I have to be serious, and that's okay. But I'm saying it's not as easy as developing for iOS or Android. More Android than iOS. All right, so that is kind of an intro to mobile game development. Any questions before I move on to the next piece that I want to talk about? And then we'll take a short break. So one thing is that, we always should look at the reasons to do, the things that we're doing. Okay, and I mean that in the best possible way. I mean, like, what's the impetus? Why would we develop for mobile? We've been talking about mobile this whole time. Is mobile the best, kind of platform? Is PC more popular than mobile? Let's take a look at some of the statistics out there, and let's take a look at the market, and especially the Canadian market, and let's see what it tells us in terms of the popularity and how do people play games anyway. So I'm going to bring up this. There's a document that I shared with you up on Blackboard. And if you look on Blackboard, there is this thing that says Video Game Industry Essential Facts 2020. This is their latest research that they've published, these guys here. And they're a fairly reputable company that has been producing kind of these essential facts for game developers in Canada over the last several years. So let's take a look at their document. It kind of looks like this. I'm going to bring it up to the top here. Oops, way to the top. And you guys can download this too. One thing I like about this document is it's specifically for the entertainment industry for games in Canada. It's not a US, kind of based document or somewhere else. It's looking in the Canadian market, which is really kind of relevant to us. Okay. I'm just going to skip down to some information. So one thing they talk about here, and again, this is part of our, I would say our challenge still, is the way we break down our demographics from a male-female perspective. I would personally like to see it more than just the two genders. I think that there's other things out there we can talk about. However, it is easy to do an analysis on only kind of this, these kind of binary choices, male-female. But I think there's other things out there, and I'm not making a statement about it. I'm just saying that when we see statistics like this, you got to think about, does this really capture everything? And I think it doesn't. I think it's a start, but I think it needs more work. And I think it's something that, we're going to get more understanding of. I don't think I'm not going to put my hand up and say I'm an expert by any means, but when I see female and male, I know, especially now that there's, we have to consider other, genders out there. And I think it's not just enough to say that. However, let's move on. I've recognized it, and I'll move on to talk about what this company has captured in terms of the way they've kind of split up or labeled different segments of the population. Again, all they've tried to do is take a sample of the population and report on it in terms of what Canadian gamers are like. So in terms of females, they say that 60% of 13 to 17-year-olds like the term gamer, and they consider themselves a gamer. Okay, which is pretty cool. I'm going to skip to the next slide, which is where males, it's 90%. Okay, so again, people who identify as males, I think that's the right way to say it. They say 52% like the term gamer. That kind of idea. 23 million Canadians, play video games and or play games in general. I would say, and 61% of them of Canadians play video games, which is really cool. From an age breakdown perspective, it looks like 61% of Canadian adults under the age of 65, so the 18 to 64 range, play video games. And whereas 89% of our children, 6 to 17-year-old, play video games. So you can see that right there, if you were going to create a video game and you're targeting, doesn't matter gender here, if you're targeting, who you're going to market to, there's a lot of kids out there. And there's a big market for them. Am I going to tell you that they're the only people to market to? No, but I'll tell you that, it's a huge market, right? And I think that it's like it says here, across all Canadian gamers, it's almost exactly 50-50 when it comes to, gender. So really, if we just wipe that out, we don't care about gender right now. All we care about is, let's look at age, right? 18 to 64 and 6 to 17. I could think about, us targeting, the younger market, and what kind of design choices will we make different if we're going to target a younger audience. A lot of different choices. And we'll see what kind of games they play. Average age of Canadian gamers, 34 years old, right? Because why? And that's really moved up a lot because there's some older gamers that play today. Again, what do you consider a gamer? To me, I'm thinking, you got to think about this. You got to think about, I can play tabletop role-playing games like D&D. I can be a war gamer or a tabletop, kind of a turn-based strategy game player like Warhammer 40K or Age of Sigmar or whatever. I could be a gamer that plays board games, right? I really like to play board games. Or I want to play cards. Or I want to play competitive cards like Magic the Gathering or something else, right? There's a lot of different ways to play, right? But we're talking about video games. And when it comes to video games, you're going to see the breakdown because that's what we're concerned with here. How about during the pandemic, right? So you can see that we played more. 58% of adults are playing more than before. Why? Because, well, a lot of us are remote, right? And we're able to, to use our time, especially our free time. We can't connect with people necessarily the entire time, but we can play, play games, on our off time as entertainment. One thing we also have to keep our eyes on, you're going to see a separate report on this, is esports. I think esports in general is going to be something that we're going to see grow over the next several years. Not that it's not growing now. I think it's growing, and like you'll see in the report, it's growing exponentially. Why? Because people like to watch. People like to spectate. And I think there's a lot to watch out there. I mean, let's face it, we watch videos of all types. I watch people play the game that I like to play, whether it's in, kind of on the desktop, like tabletop, whether I like to play video games or whether I'm playing Magic, whatever it is, you can watch, someone play it. And there's entertainment in watching somebody make choices. And there's some really great videos out there, companies that make amazing videos with high quality and good YouTube personalities and other places as well, on Twitch and so on, that you can get some really great entertainment. We're going to see a lot of that come up. Again, is it relative to what we're talking about here today? No, but I think it's something to take a look at in terms of market draw, where our eyes will go in terms of development. In terms of why Canadians play, this is really cool. So puzzle and word games, 37% of adults versus 24% of kids and teens, where you can see that kids really like action and adventure games more than adults. And adults like strategy and role-playing games more than kids in general, okay? One thing we've seen is a decrease, and this is not here, but you can see a decrease in MMOs in their popularity as they continue to go down. Same thing with social games. There's a lot of, especially lately with the pandemic, I think there's a lot of people playing, games that are single-player games. There's a resurgence of that, especially when it comes to things like strategy games because of adults and so on. Sports games, again, not quite as popular as first-person shooters and first-person team-based kind of games. Fortnite is an example of that, and other ones. The other thing that we can look at in terms of this is age. I like to look at the age. So again, we have gamers 6 to 12. Some of them like Roblox and others like Minecraft. But you can see Minecraft is like generally kind of universally in that age range, 6 to 12, right? Same thing with Mario Kart. So between the two of them, they're pretty good. Roblox, I would say, is definitely something that is pank. I mean, if you can make a game for Roblox, it's going to definitely, kind of hit both. It's not listed here, but I'll tell you that there's so many kids, at least in the people that I know, there's a lot of kids that love Roblox. One thing to note also is what the percentage is and the average hours per week. Notice that, they range from, in the 6 to 12 age range, from 9 to 12 hours. And that's a lot of hours playing video games. Just recently, there was a article that was published about China and how they listed or they limited their children to only play 3 hours of games or access to the internet a week, right? Which works out to be about 30 minutes a day. For my son, that would be like punishing. I would punish him to only limit him to 30 minutes a day. So whereas he plays a lot more, and again, he's right in this little demographic right here. So again, from the other age range, 13 to 17, again, we see Mario Kart still around. So that's a popular game, as well as Minecraft, right? And then one thing that's come up more and more, Sims, which is more casual gamers. There's also some first-person kind of adventure, first-person shooter, that kind of stuff happening here. Action adventure games happening in that 13 to 17 age range. Where 18 to 34, you can see again, Mario Kart is just holding strong throughout the entire demographic here, right? So why am I talking about this? Because these are the kind of games that people love, right? And understanding what people are looking for can really target the way you develop games, right? Which is what I'm talking about here, right? As we get older, you can see that our game choices change from, more of a strategy type or, desktop simulator type where we're playing solitaire. A lot of older adults, whether it's male or female or however they identify, play solitaire because you know what? That's what they grew up with, right? So, and other type of desktop simulators because that's kind of the first thing that they were exposed to, and they still play it today, right? So I think you can see the split. You can also see that they also play just as many hours of video games as anybody else. Look at the hours. If you look at any of the hours average, I mean, here you can easily see that this demographic here from 13 to 17 is the demographic that has the largest number of hours. 13 to 17, we have the most hours played, 21 hours per week, from 9.5 hours to 21 hours per week. Whereas as we get older, again, 18 to 34, 8.5 to 12 hours per week. So this is pretty heavy, but just as good as the lower age range, right? But once we get up there, older gamers don't play quite as long, but still 8 to 9 hours per week. It's huge, right? So when we think about that people are playing games, a lot of people are playing games. It's a large part of our entertainment. There is a market. When there's a market, we can sell to it. But what do we make? Do we make a solitaire or a Candy Crush or something like that? And what about the platform? So think about the platform. So, well, first of all, let's look at Ontario. In Ontario, we have 63% of adult gamers play video games, right? And the average age of an adult gamer is 37. That's huge. Why? Because there's been a lot of people playing games for a long, long time, right? Some of the younger gamers now have aged and they've basically introduced games to their kids. And that's how it goes, right? And they still play 9 hours per week. It's not like it's gone down much, right? So that's pretty good. And then in Ontario, 90% of kids and teens, okay, take a look at that demographic here. 63% of adults, but 90% of kids play video games. 90%. Guys, that's huge. 13.5 hours per week. More hours than the adults, right? They have more time on their hands. And who's going to pay for those games? The adults, right? So huge market. And some of them are going to play with their kids. How do they play, right? Well, let's take a look. Well, 70% of adults play online. Some of them, again, you can answer yes to all these questions. 44% of adults play online solo. 58% of adults play offline. And 48% of adults play offline solo, right? So there's like different ways of playing, but you can see that 70% of adults play online, right? I'm not going to look at Esrb ratings. 53% of parents of kid gamers 6 to 12 always check Esrb video game ratings. 53%. Yeah, I do too. I don't want my son, or my daughter playing games that they shouldn't be playing. And it's probably because I've given it to them, not because they're asking for it. Devices where we really care about for this course. So 94% of adult gamers report owning and using mobile devices for video game play. 94% as compared to 88% for PCs and 56% for consoles. All right. So again, I think this is a story that we can play on again. We know there's a large market of gamers, and more often than not, they're going to play on their mobile device. Right there, there's a reason for developing for mobile. Right there. Okay. And that means, and this is adult gamers, how about kids? So kids, again, large market, 48% of them play on mobile devices, more again than any other type of platform, so more than a PC and more than a console. Okay, that's adults. Sorry, kids and teens, 35% versus 20 versus console. Console seems to be the #1 platform for kids and teens. Okay, and why is that? Ease of use. So 48% for adults for mobile. So you're going to target more adults on the mobile game side. Why? Because they have a mobile device. Kids and teens may not have their own iPhone. They might have an iPad, and that's where this comes from, 35%, right? But consoles, really, really popular for kids. The Switch, a console, as well as, let's say, an Xbox or a PS5, most likely an Xbox, because PS4s or the PlayStation Network is more for adults. They don't show it here, but you'll see it in other statistics. And how about multiple devices? 60% of Canadians play on multiple devices. The multiple devices are for to ask yourself the question, which means virtual reality, console, mobile, and computer. If you play all four, then you're in that 4% range. Okay, that's me. I play all four in all four platforms, right? Kids and teens, again, 4% of kids play on all four devices. My son is in that range because we have a mobile device, a virtual reality device at home. All right, so that's where they play. But how many of them are on mobile only? 20% of adults only on mobile, right? And we're on kids. 12% of kids are only on mobile, right? So again, you can clearly see that when we target mobile, we're targeting adults. Even though there's a lot of kids playing mobile, if you're specifically talking about people who play on mobile devices, most of them are adults. And if they're an adult, we can go back to the previous stats. And we can kind of say, well, how many adults that are on mobile? What age range are we talking about? 18 to 65. You're going to see first-person shooters. You're going to see strategy games. You're going to see those kind of things, and less other types of games that the kids like to play. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Esports is huge, and again, I don't want to talk about it too much, but one thing to note is that it is exponentially increasing. You can see 20% of kids and teens watch esports tournaments online, 26% of adult gamers, and 31% of adults engage in game streaming as a viewer, spectator. And I think that's about as much as I want to cover with, when it comes to the stats. But I think it's important to take a look at this stuff because it can change the way we develop games and why we develop them. What things are we going to be including and who are we going to be targeting, our target audience? One thing's for certain, 90% of us in one way or another, use mobile devices to play games. And I think it validates the reason for developing for mobile. All right. Any questions around the stats or anything else I presented to you? Again, this is just one company. We can't just look at one company for statistics. I think you need to look at more than one source, more than one valid source that's out there. But this is one interesting source I think that I found over the years is interesting in terms of direction. You can also look at past years as well and see the trend, and it's specific for the Canadian gamer market. So Kira says, can be self-fulfilling though. If there are fewer adventure games on mobile and kids are more likely to prefer adventure games, and that's a whole cross-section of kids who aren't going to be playing mobile. Yeah. Choose the game, then the console play on rather than the other way around. It's true. I mean, I think the IP is important, right? And a good example of that is any popular game that's out there, right? I mean, you want to be able to play it wherever you want it, right? It really depends on the game itself. And again, we've talked about, popular games, and I think the game obviously drives it, but also at the same time, we should consider who's playing it, who's there to play, and what do they like, right? So I think both things are valid. Okay, at this point, what I want to try and do is I think we should take a small break. I'm going to stop recording this section, which is all around theory. It's all around, kind of an intro to game dev, why mobile game dev, why we do it, what's the impetus, why, what's pushing us to develop for mobile, different platforms we've covered, and those kind of things. Hardware limitations we talked about, and how to develop from one platform versus the other, positives and negatives. And I think what we're going to do is take a short break. We're sitting at 4:20. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. So we'll come back at around 4:30. And then I'm going to keep the stream going, but I'm just going to stop the YouTube stuff, and I'll restart in about 10 minutes with the tech side. Okay, we'll start developing with Unity. All right, so we're not streaming